Raquel Welch had some intimidating shoes, or some might say bikinis, to fill. When she burst onto the scene in Fantastic Voyage in the 1960s, she was immediately compared to Jean Harlow, Rita Hayworth, Jane Russell, and Marilyn Monroe. She perhaps did not quite live up to those stellar heights, and yet it was Raquel Welch who had become the ultimate sex symbol and the icon of the radical new cinematic world of the 1960s. The world was changing rapidly and movies became more daring, more graphic, and more subversive. And yet the literal poster girl for the new sexuality was a conservative Midwestern girl who famously never once took off her clothes. At least not all of them. She was also maligned as a diva and was a terrifying opponent not only to her co-stars, but even to the Hollywood studios themselves, who she left gobsmacked when she took them to court and in a landmark case, won. But soon enough, Hollywood would have its revenge on Raquel Welch. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Raquel Welch, originally named Jo Raquel Tejada, was born on September 5, 1940 in Chicago. Her father, Armando Carlos Tejada Urquizo, was an aeronautical engineer of Spanish heritage from La Paz, Bolivia. Armando came from a prestigious family, and Raquel's cousin, Lydia Guyer Tejeda, became Bolivia's first female president and the second female non-royal head of state in the Americas. Her mother, Josephine Sarah Hall, had English roots with ancestors who were among the Mayflower passengers. Raquel was the eldest of 3 children with a younger brother named James and a younger sister named Gail. In 1942, the family relocated to La Jolla, California, where Raquel went to public school. Raised as a Presbyterian, she attended Pacific Beach Presbyterian Church with her family every Sunday. Like many aspiring performers, Raquel started to attend ballet classes at the age of 7. As she grew up, Raquel quickly realized that her stunning looks and rapidly developing physique were her biggest assets. At 14, she won the titles of Miss Photogenic and Miss Contour in local beauty contests. She also earned the titles of Fairest of the Fair at the San Diego County Fair and Miss La Jolla. Her success in these contests then led to her winning the state title of Maid of California. Looking back later on her teenage years, a typically forthright Raquel told the press, "I've got news for you. No one ever fawned over me. Do you think in my day-to-day life that my mother, my friends, even a boy would tell me I was attractive all the time? No, oh no. It would have been too much for his masculine pride. I entered a beauty contest just for fun. I didn't think I'd win. Well, I did. I'll tell you why I won. Because I walk the best in high heels. Not because I was so beautiful. The others didn't know how to walk. Well, do you suppose all the girls gathered around me when I won the beauty contest? No, it was not fun and games when I was growing up." At 17, her dream of becoming a ballet dancer was crushed when, after 10 years of training, her instructor told her she lacked the physique for a professional ballet career. And then her parents' divorce shortly after she graduated from high school added to the turmoil. In 1958, Raquel married James Welch, her high school sweetheart. She took his last name, which she kept throughout her life. An honors graduate from high school, she attended San Diego State College on a theater arts scholarship. However, after only a year at the school, she left college to earn some practical stage experience. She performed with the Drury Lane Players in San Diego and worked as a weather girl on a local television station while picking up various gigs as a model on the side. From this experience, Raquel landed several roles in local theater plays. For example, in 1959, she played the lead role in the Ramona Pageant, an outdoor play in Hemet, California, based on the novel Ramona by Helen Hunt Jackson. Raquel and James Welch had 2 children, Damon, born in 1959, and Tani, born in 1961. In later years, Raquel refused to talk about her husband and this period of her life in general. She did say that her husband did not treat her well, but she never shared much more about him. In any case, by 1960, the demands of her professional life were putting a strain on her marriage. The arrival of Tani did nothing to ease the stress, and the couple separated in 1962. It wasn't until the late 1960s, by which time Raquel was internationally famous, that anyone ever knew she had been married and had 2 children. Before that, she found herself in a tough situation. She was a single mother of 2 without a stable job and had to rely entirely on herself. Her parents, dealing with their own new lives apart, had never been particularly enthusiastic about their daughter's ambitions to become an actress. She decided to set aside her Hollywood plans and relocate to Dallas. There, she managed to scrape a precarious living as a model for Neiman Marcus and as a cocktail waitress. This lifestyle was not sustainable for Raquel, who was determined to succeed. She often recounted to interviewers how her mother once gave her a copy of Harold Robbins' book, The Carpetbaggers, which was about Hollywood's rise and its wayward, often deeply troubled characters. Her mother suggested she read it and see if she still really wanted to become a movie star. This attempt at dissuasion backfired as Raquel found the lurid Hollywood tales only ignited her enthusiasm further. At first, Raquel planned to move to New York City from Dallas, but instead returned to Los Angeles in 1963 and began scouring for roles with various film studios. She used her show-stopping beauty to land a role on television's The Hollywood Palace as one of the Billboard Girls, in which she announced upcoming guests for the variety show. She also appeared briefly on Red Skelton's and Danny Kaye's shows. It was around this time that Raquel met Patrick Curtis, a 28-year-old former child actor who had appeared as Olivia de Havilland's child in Gone with the Wind, and who was now working as a talent agency executive. In an interview with Look magazine in 1967, Curtis said, "In Hollywood, girls look more like Sandra Dee than Sophia Loren. I was flabbergasted when this knockout told me she was a recent college scholarship student from San Diego. Straight A's, too. We decided to form an alliance and try to make her a star. I quit my job and we started a corporation we called Kurtwell, something like opening a filling station, an honest business venture, with honest aims from the start." The key to success, as always, would be hard work. Curtis required Raquel to take 3 dance lessons and 2 singing lessons each week. He focused on crafting her image as a photographer's dream. The goal was to transform her into a genuine sex symbol and help her enter the Hollywood talent radar. To avoid her being typecast as a Latina, he also persuaded her to continue to use her ex-husband's surname. Under his guidance, Raquel flaunted her figure in various settings, such as tennis courts, swimming pools, and beaches, to gain publicity and enhance her image. She also set some guidelines for Curtis to ensure her new persona was always prepared. Raquel explained, "I have to know the occasion, the atmosphere, the reason, what I should wear, how I should do my hair, what I should be prepared to talk about." This insistence on having everything possible at her disposal to maximize the impact of her physical presence would be a recurring theme, and sometimes major point of conflict, throughout her acting career. Raquel's transition from beauty queen to sex symbol was a success. In 1964, she made her film debut in the Elvis Presley musical, Roustabout. The film, mainly known for starring Presley alongside veteran actress Barbara Stanwyck, featured Raquel in a minor role as a college student. Later in 1964, Raquel appeared in Joseph E. Levine's adaptation of Polly Adler's autobiography, A House Is Not a Home. Released 3 months after Roustabout, although filmed earlier, the movie featured Raquel as one of Polly's girls, in a portrayal of New York's famous Madame. Eddie Williams, who would later be seen in Fox's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, also appeared as one of the girls. On October 2, 1964, Live magazine featured a photo story on rising Hollywood stars, and Raquel Welch was included alongside Mia Farrow. The article proclaimed, "The end of the great girl drought." Later that year, on November 21, 1964, Raquel appeared at the 12th annual Deb Star Ball, held at the Hollywood Palladium. She was introduced as one of the 10 stars of tomorrow. This was an event covered on television, which gave her plenty of exposure. Raquel also had small roles in television shows such as Bewitched, McHale's Navy, and The Virginian, and appeared as a Billboard girl on the Hollywood Palace. Right at the end of the year, she auditioned for the role of Mary Ann Summers on Gilligan's Island, but did not get the part. But even if this was a disappointment, her star was set to rise. But the following year would be a little slower than she might have hoped. In 1965, Raquel's only film release was A Swinging Summer. This rock and roll teen movie cast Raquel in a supporting role. Set at a summer resort, the movie involved a pretty light-hearted plot, with a mix of musical performances by the Righteous Brothers and others. It played in the lower half of double features in small theaters. Raquel contributed her singing voice to the soundtrack album. This then led to a big chance, as she was seriously considered for the role of Domino in Thunderball. However, it went to French actress Claudine Auger. In an example of the Mandela effect, many people often associate Raquel Welch with the Bond series and believe she was a Bond girl, although she never once appeared in any of the Bond movies, with her domino test the closest she ever got. Raquel caught the eye of producer Saul David, whose wife had seen her at the Deb Star Ball. As it happened, David was working on a Bond spoof, Our Man Flint, for 20th Century Fox. Impressed by Raquel, David recommended her to Fox as a candidate for a role in his film. With Curtis's help, Raquel then secured a contract with the studio. She agreed to a 7-year non-exclusive deal, which included 5 films over the next 5 years and 2 additional options. Studio executives wanted to change her name to Debbie because they believed Raquel might be difficult to pronounce. She refused and chose to keep her name as Raquel Welch. Raquel was screen tested for Our Man Flint, but was ultimately cast in another project David had ready, Fantastic Voyage. By the mid-1960s, Fox had changed a lot since the days when Marilyn Monroe was the studio's top star and major box office draw. Darryl F. Zanuck, who had been in Europe as an independent producer since 1956, returned to the U.S. in 1962 and became president of the studio that August. After the financial disaster of Cleopatra, Fox closed for 9 months and reopened on April 23, 1963, with a restructured setup. The studio's size was reduced from 282 acres to just 76 acres, with 21 sound stages. Richard Darryl Zanuck, who had started out in Fox's story and publicity departments in the early 1950s, eventually became vice president of his father's company. He produced several films, including Compulsion in 1959 and Sanctuary 2 years later, and was an associate producer of The Longest Day the year after that. In October 1962, Richard Zanuck became the de facto head of production at Fox, and by 1967 he was the executive vice president in charge of production. When Raquel Welch joined Fox, the studio had very few contract players left. The film industry was in flux. Hollywood was no longer the global production center, and television had not yet been fully mastered. As Darryl Zanuck noted at the time, today's audience is so unpredictable. Even if you make a great picture and get great reviews, you still can't be sure enough that people will want to see it to make you any money. In Fantastic Voyage, Raquel Welch was second billed as Cora Peterson, a medical assistant to Arthur Kennedy. She played part of a team of scientists who embarked on a miniaturized submarine journey through a patient's bloodstream to perform emergency surgery. Set in the year 1995, the film was known more for its special effects, which won an Oscar, rather than for its plot. Judith Crist commented on NBC TV's Today Show, "It is a pity that the intellectual content never rises above Raquel Welch's bustline or Stephen Boyd's histrionic talents." Nevertheless, the film was a commercial success, earning over $5.5 million. Raquel's figure, accentuated by her skin-tight suit, had people glued to the screen, particularly as she was the only female presence throughout most of the film's 100 minutes. Off-screen, Raquel fell in love with her co-star, Stephen Boyd. She made her feelings clear, but Irish actor Boyd showed no interest, a fact which certainly surprised and confused her legion of male admirers, and the unrequited passion left her feeling dejected. Following Fantastic Voyage, Raquel was given a non-exclusive contract by Fox, allowing her more freedom than past studio stars. She could choose projects with other companies and had considerable control over her career. So Raquel and her manager, Patrick Curtis, went to Europe. They aimed to attract major publicity, particularly in Rome. The plan was successful. Raquel's frequent poses for the press made her a favorite among Italian photographers, who knew that pictures of her would make big money due to the growing hype about her beauty and glamour. By August 1966, Raquel had appeared on the covers of 92 European magazines and 19 American ones. She said, "I created my own Zap and Sacco." Curtis knew that Raquel needed to maintain a strong presence on screen to push her career beyond being just a cover girl. Consequently, she took on roles in several European films, which would be released over the following years. Raquel explained to the press, "In the studio you don't have an audience, but I don't miss them because I have my own. What I work for is the gratification of the director and cameraman, the men of quality. They are my real audience. What I am always looking for is that inner feeling that I have done right." Fox lent Raquel Welch to Hammer Studios in England for the 1966 film 1,000,000 Years BC, a remake of the 1940 Hal Roach movie 1,000,000 BC. During filming, which was managed by Ed Feldman of Seven Arts Films, photographers took some astonishing images of Raquel in her primitive cavewoman attire, a minimal doe-skin bikini. These images went the 1960s equivalent of viral, appearing in newspapers and magazines worldwide even before the film's release in April 1967. And the image's fame was no flash in the pan. The famous pinup of Raquel from this film was featured in The Shawshank Redemption, where it can be seen on Andy Dufresne's prison cell wall. The film, based on the 1940 version that had helped launch another Fox star, Carol Landis, played fairly true to its predecessor, with just a few added grunts to improve the dialogue. Raquel wasn't the only great thing about 1,000,000 Years BC. It also featured astounding special effects by Ray Harryhausen. Fox knew the film's core appeal and promoted the films with ads proclaiming Raquel Welch wearing mankind's first bikini. The plot, for what it's worth, had Raquel playing Loana, a member of the Shell People, who becomes romantically involved with Tumac, played by John Richardson, from the Rock People. Her role was limited to delivering 2 words, Akita, meaning help, and Saren, evidently meaning giant bird, with the rest relying on her impressive natural ability for pantomime. Perhaps surprisingly, the New York Times praised the film and Raquel's performance, describing her as a marvelous breathing monument to womankind, and noting, "The best scene has a giant bird dangling Miss Welch over a nest of its gaping youngins, while it battles a rival in mid-air. Poor Miss Welch, but a shrewd old bird." With 1,000,000 Years BC earning $2.5 million at the box office, Fox's strategy to market Raquel as a sex symbol was successful. However, Raquel herself did not fully cooperate with this image, saying, "I don't even try to be sexy. What I aim for is that kind of sensuality that foreign women, particularly Sophia Loren, have. That's something that comes from inside." There was also another even more controversial publicity shot by Terry O'Neill, which remained unseen until more than 30 years later. The photograph, titled Raquel Welch on the Cross, was both an artistic and personal statement for Raquel Welch and photographer O'Neill. It came about as Raquel felt nervous about being photographed in the fur bikini. She feared negative press, saying that she thought the media would crucify her for exposing so much female flesh. Inspired, O'Neill swiftly requested that 20th Century Fox bring over a crucifix, and he began taking multiple photos from various angles of her on the cross in the bikini, with the idea of making a statement to fend off the inevitable backlash against Welch. The image was meant to symbolize the feeling of being scrutinized and judged by the media, which often criticized Raquel for relying solely on her looks. However, O'Neill, raised Catholic, was concerned that the photo might be seen as blasphemous rather than the feminist art piece it was intended to be. Consequently, he delayed publishing the photos for decades, and what would likely have been a major controversy was avoided. On February 14, 1967, Raquel Welch married Patrick Curtis in a civil ceremony in Paris. Raquel went for wow factor by wearing a crocheted see-through mini dress, causing a stir among the French photographers and creating quite a scene at the municipal building as people fought each other to gawp at her. In mid-1967, Raquel appeared in Shoot Loud, Louder, I Don't Understand. This was supposed to be a way for her to show off her ability to excel in an art house European film, but the film was a bomb. Co-starring with Italian superstar Marcello Mastroianni, Raquel played Tania Motini, a high-class woman who becomes entangled with a troubled artist. As Arthur Knight of the Saturday Review noted, and Raquel Welch, who in the past year has made more magazine covers than movies, here reveals the probable reason. As Mastroianni's dream girl, she looks great. But in every scene, she seems as improbable as her dubbed-in Italian dialogue. Another cheeky critic Riley remarked, her acting ranges from busty to hippie. Raquel's next film, Fathom, produced by Fox and filmed in Spain, was more a vehicle for her white bikini than for its plot or cinematic merit. The film felt outdated despite its vibrant colors and psychedelic camera setups. With minimal dialogue and limited character development, Raquel played Fathom Harville, a skydiver who gets mixed up in espionage. Fathom received some positive media coverage, with the New York Times noting, somewhere between her unfortunate arrival in the revival of 1 million years BC and her new film, Miss Welch has learned to act. At least she now uncorks a kind of frightened, spunky vivacity perfectly in tune with the tone and content of Fathom. But the Times' continued support for Welch was the exception rather than the rule. Pretty much everyone else hated the film. Time remarked, Raquel tries to come on as the movie's newest sex queen. For that role, her credentials are ample. But Raquel Welches on herself every time she speaks. She seems less a living, breathing doll than an antiseptic Barbie doll who got lost on her way to the nursery. Roger Ebert gave out one of his extremely rare 0 stars reviews for the film, while the Los Angeles Times dismissed Raquel as being little more than a Maria Montez clone, great to look at, but devoid of talent. During the making of Fathom, Raquel had her first widely reported clash with a co-star, the temperamental Anthony Franciosa. She told Sheila Graham, "I'm not trying to win a popularity contest. You have to do what you think is right. I don't think it's possible to be an individual and try to please everybody, and I think that this business needs individuals. I believe that to be a star, one must be strong-minded. Everyone says I'm so cunning and deceitful. All I want is to be successful and be left to work out my own life." Bedazzled, a Stanley Donen film released by Fox in December 1967, was a modern twist on the Faust legend. Created by Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, the film was clever enough but overly long. Raquel appeared briefly as Lillian Lust, one of the 7 deadly sins. Although her role was just a short cameo, Raquel's involvement provided the film with the star attraction it otherwise lacked. In its review, Variety remarked, "Expectedly, Miss Welch strips, which is pleasant gandering, and even has a few lines." In early 1967, Fox acquired Jacqueline Susan's best-selling novel, The Valley of the Dolls, and began filming. Raquel turned down the lead role of Jennifer, which was eventually taken by Sharon Tate. This decision led Fox to suspend her. Richard Zanuck, head of the studio, commented, "She tested. That's unheard of for an actress to test and then refuse the part. So I put her on suspension. Later on, I took her back." Raquel's refusal stemmed from her desire to avoid being typecast as just a sex symbol. If you have a physical attractiveness, you don't have to act. People don't expect anything of you. If they don't expect it, then it's not required to deliver it. But as an actress, I'd like to display the ability to act, and I want the opportunity to do so. When asked about comparisons to Marilyn Monroe, who had voiced similar concerns years earlier, Raquel said, "I wouldn't like to be like her. I certainly don't envy her. She was very unhappy and took her life because she felt she was so inadequate. She felt nobody liked her except for physical appeal alone. That's very dangerous for a woman because you can't be young and beautiful forever." Raquel's first film release of 1968 was the biggest bundle of them all, made during her 1966 Italian stay. This international co-production featured Vittorio De Sica, Edward G. Robinson, Robert Wagner, and Godfrey Cambridge. The film, about a bungling gang assisting a retired gangster in a heist, aimed for comedy but fell a little short. Raquel played Juliana, Wagner's whimsical girlfriend, and performed a lively dance with an energetic Robinson. During the filming, Raquel's diva reputation began to truly emerge. She was frequently late, leading Robinson, well known for his hard-headed nature and professionalism, to reprimand her. After a stern talking to, Raquel promised to improve, though she was late again the next day. The director warned her that if her behavior didn't change, she would be excluded from close-ups and key scenes. Her attitude adjusted immediately after that. Robinson remarked, "I must say she has quite a body. She has been the product of a good publicity campaign. I hope she lives up to it because a body will only take you so far." The Queens, released in March 1968, was shot in Rome in 1966. After this was Bandolero, a Western spoof released in July 1968. This was a hit and earned $5.5 million at the box office. Director Andrew M. McLaughlin cleverly allowed the cast to play the genre for laughs. A New York reviewer commented, "Raquel Welch, the nobly endowed, chaste lady, confesses in pseudo-Latin accents that she had been a slightly sordid citizen, and that her late husband had bought her from her poor father for 5 cows and a gun. All things considered, that's the best buy in Bandolero." Raquel's fourth film of 1968 was The Oldest Profession. She earned $100,000 for her 2 weeks of work at the Berlin Film Studios. The film, a 6-part exploration of prostitution through the ages, included Raquel's segment titled The Gay 90s. In it, she discovers her client's identity as a banker and persuades her wealthy lover to propose, pretending to love him for who he is. The film was criticized for its grainy photography and poor dubbing. In Lady in Cement, a sequel to Tony Rome from 1967, released in November 1968, Raquel starred alongside Frank Sinatra. Raquel admitted the film was terrible, but he, Sinatra, had the most raw talent and magnetism of any man I've ever met. Raquel, having proven herself as reliable box office draw across various films, was being hailed as a superstar. When asked about her status, she remarked, "Yes, superstars get to a point where they want to put themselves on a pedestal. Liz Taylor had always been flamboyant, though. Sophia Loren came up from nowhere, and her stardom has meant social snobbery. Success for me doesn't mean social position. It means satisfaction and not being upset by the public's thinking of me as sensual. But right now, too many people when they meet me have a misconception about what I'm going to be, some sort of Amazon superwoman." Raquel Welch's second Western, 100 Rifles, was produced by Fox and filmed in Spain, hitting theaters in April 1969. The film turned out to be one of the most contentious of her career. In 100 Rifles, Raquel was cast in a supporting role with former football star Jim Brown taking top billing. Brown's film career had a trajectory similar to Raquel's. He made his acting debut in Rio Conchos in 1964 at Fox, the same year Raquel started with Roustabout and A House Is Not a Home. Both stars often found themselves used as promotional tools to boost underperforming action films, with their acting skills sometimes taking a backseat to their physical presence. 100 Rifles featured an interracial romance, a bold move that went against Hollywood's unspoken rules of the time. However, with changing social attitudes, the film's provocative nature was seen as a selling point rather than a risk. The film's publicity often focused on the off-screen drama between Raquel and Brown, overshadowing the movie itself. One notable scene involved Raquel in a shower at a water tower, which was meant to distract soldiers on a train. Director Grice pushed Raquel to perform the scene nude, but she declined, continuing her long-standing resistance to such demands. While rumors of a romance between Raquel and Brown may have been exaggerated for publicity, Raquel did have a genuine affair with actor Sancho Gracia, who had a minor role in the film. When her then-husband Curtis discovered this, he chased Gracia through their hotel in Agua Dulce at gunpoint. Raquel's other film for 1969 was Flare Up, which debuted as part of a double feature in November. In this film, she played Michelle, a go-go dancer pursued from Las Vegas to Los Angeles by a deranged killer. Raquel earned over $300,000 for her role. Interestingly, much of Raquel's famous physique was, for once, not prominently displayed, except in a nightclub scene early in the film. Fox acquired the controversial novel Myra Breckenridge by Gore Vidal, planning to make a film adaptation with Raquel in the lead role of the transgender protagonist. This was a progressive move for the studio, or so it thought, but considering the era's limited sensitivity towards transgender issues, the handling of this project could not have been much more of a disaster. Anne Bancroft and Elizabeth Taylor had also been considered for the role, but Raquel was chosen. Producer Robert Fryer commented, "If a man were going to become a woman, he would want to become the most beautiful woman in the world. He would become Raquel Welch." Raquel, receiving $200,000 for the role, responded to the press, "Look, it obviously isn't my dream part, but it's the first real role I've ever been offered, and it's the first time I'll be able to exercise as a comedienne. Image? I don't think one role, even this one, can hurt that. As a matter of fact, the whole campy sex symbol thing has gone too far in one direction, as far as I'm concerned. Playing Myra will probably do me more good than harm." This would be a classic case of famous last words. When Mae West was coaxed out of retirement to play the man-eating talent agent Letitia Van Allen, expectations for on-screen fireworks between her and Raquel were high. The film's production was chaotic, when director Michael Sarn hugely exceeding the budget and indulging in unorthodox methods, like spending up to 7 hours alone to think, while the cast and crew waited on set filming miles and miles of non-essential scenes. Sarn's self-indulgent directorial style caused many delays and serious tension on set. The film was also controversial due to the inclusion of footage from older films, leading to a slew of legal challenges from actors whose images were used without permission. Rex Reed, who made his film debut in the movie, remarked, "This was a film where the lawsuits really flew." Richard Zanuck also had strong words about the chaos surrounding Myra Breckenridge. "I've never seen so many personality conflicts on one picture," he remarked. "Fryer has quit 3 times. I don't think there's anyone on this movie who hasn't been fired or quit 3 times, including me." He also expressed sympathy for producer Fryer. "I feel sorry for Bob. Raquel is always nervous during a film. Rex isn't exactly easy. And Sarn is rough, much tougher than he looks." Meanwhile, screenwriter David Giler, whose original script had Gore Vidal's approval, was harshly critical of Sarn. He darkly lamented that in a world when the Kennedys had been assassinated, no one had a bullet for Sarn. As production neared its end, tensions rose to new heights. The film had gone $1 million over budget, leading Zanuck to order a hasty conclusion in the editing room. During this period, Mae West and Raquel Welch had become estranged and were no longer speaking. West had a peculiar clause in her contract that stipulated she alone could wear black and white dresses. When Welch arrived for their scene in a black dress with a white ruffle, West was outraged and complained to producers. Welch compromised by dyeing the ruffle pale blue, knowing it would appear white on camera, but the damage was done and the 2 stars went to war. Farrah Fawcett, making her film debut in Myra Breckenridge, found herself in the middle of the conflict between Welch and West. West initially refused to work with Fawcett because of her blonde hair, prompting Fawcett to dye it. When Welch saw Fawcett's new hair color, she was equally displeased. Fawcett then settled on a hair color that was a blend of both West's and Welch's shades. Ultimately, Mae West seemed to have the upper hand, received top billing, exclusive rights to wear black and white outfits, and the freedom to write her own dialogue. Gene Siskel reviewed the film unfavorably. Gratuitous nudity and oafish direction have replaced wit and mystery. But that was about the kindest review the film would receive. Herb Kelly of the Miami News was more scathing, declaring, "I now nominate Myra Breckenridge as the worst movie ever made. Nothing can touch it for tastelessness and boredom." Gore Vidal himself disowned the film, dismissing it as an awful joke. For a while, this fiasco seemed to signal the end of Raquel Welch's film career, but she would have a few more opportunities to prove herself in the 1970s. In January 1970, The Magic Christian, a bad-taste all-star sexploitation film based on Terry Southern's novel, hit theaters. Raquel Welch made a brief appearance as a whip-wielding character. The film, featuring Peter Sellers as the wealthiest man in the world who sets out to prove that everyone has a price. Raquel's role was set aboard the opulent ocean liner, The Magic Christian. In this segment, she was briefly shown as a voluptuous slave priestess whipping a group of topless female slaves. Her provocative photo with the whip was heavily used to promote the film, as you might imagine by now. On April 7, 1970, during the 42nd Annual Academy Awards, Raquel Welch took part in presenting the awards. Leaning suggestively over the lectern, she made a playful remark about presenting the Special Visual Effects Award, adding with a wink, "And there are 2 of them." The double entendre was well received by the glamorous audience at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, although if a host were to repeat that kind of thing in the 2020s, no doubt you'd be able to hear a pin drop. Later that month, when the New York Daily News asked about her career, Raquel described her roles as campy and not of her choosing. "I consider all of the roles that I have done as camp. They have not been things of my choice. They've been things that the studios have put me in, so I guess the best way to survive them is to play them to the hilt. If writers are going to put some cliché characters in their scripts, you might as well give it all you've got." In April 1970, Raquel starred in her own CBS television special titled simply Raquel. The show included appearances by John Wayne and Bob Hope, with Tom Jones as a guest vocalist. Raquel also performed a parody skit of her arch-enemy, Mae West. In the summer of 1970, Raquel filmed The Beloved on location in Cyprus. The movie, which featured Richard Johnson, Jack Hawkins, and Dame Flora Robson, was a modern drama with elements of Greek tragedy. Written and directed by George Pankosmatos, it was produced by Raquel's Kurtwell Productions and released by MGM. At the start of 1971, Raquel Welch starred in Hanny Calder, a western filmed in Spain in collaboration with Kurtwell Productions and Tygon Films. Hanny Calder was forgotten about for the most part, until Quentin Tarantino cited it as an inspiration for his 2003 film Kill Bill, Volume 1. Raquel was constantly pressed about when she would appear nude on screen, but she always firmly resisted. She said, "I will never do a nude scene, of course. I'm afraid nudity is being misused, and I don't see why anyone should care one way or another who takes off his clothes or who doesn't. 90% of the time when I've witnessed nudity on the screen, or in person, it's the most anticlimactic thing. Publicly, I am somewhat of a flamboyant exhibitionist, but there's a certain point where it stops. It finishes. It's over and there's not going to be any more. What I do on the screen is not to be equated with what I do in my private life. Privately, I am understated and dislike any hoopla." In 1972, Raquel starred in Kansas City Bomber, where she played a tough roller derby star and single mother balancing her quest for personal happiness with her ambition for fame. Life magazine hailed her performance as the hottest thing on wheels. The film's production was hit by a 6-week delay when Raquel broke her wrist while performing her own stunts. During this break, she flew to Budapest to film a cameo in Bluebeard opposite Richard Burton, and attended a lavish party for Elizabeth Taylor's 40th birthday, although this was despite being pointedly uninvited by Taylor herself. December 1972 saw Raquel making her nightclub debut at the Las Vegas Hilton, where her act preceded Elvis Presley's. This year also saw her divorce Curtis, after a few troubled years, not least due to Welch's infidelity. Curtis later claimed in the tabloids that Raquel had an abortion during their marriage, a claim Raquel never confirmed. If true, this would have contradicted her political views. In 2014, Raquel described herself as conservative, attributing her views to her upbringing and her mother's Midwestern values. She strongly supported the Vietnam War and participated in USO shows with Bob Hope. After her separation from Curtis, Raquel dated several high-profile men, including football player Joe Namath, producer Robert Evans, and comedian Freddie Prinze. In 1973, Raquel appeared in The Last of Sheila and The Three Musketeers. Her role in the latter earned her a Golden Globe for Best Actress in Comedy. This was the highest official recognition she would achieve in her long career, but there were other opportunities for her to have done so, but she missed her chance. For example, she was offered the lead role in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore in 1974, which eventually won an Oscar for Ellen Burstyn, and she declined the part of Honey Bruce in the successful Lenny from the same year. By her 30s, Raquel was growing wary of acting and the repetitive roles she was offered, which often became industry jokes. In the following decade, Raquel limited herself to smaller roles and TV work. In 1975, she appeared in The Wild Party and performed a duet with Cher on The Cher Show, singing I'm a Woman. She co-starred with Bill Cosby and Harvey Keitel in the 1976 action comedy Mother, Jugs, and Speed, where her character's promotion from dispatcher to EMT had some early themes of feminism, and a discussion about equal pay among men and women, radical stuff by Hollywood standards. In 1977, Raquel acted in the French film Animal, alongside Jean-Paul Belmondo, and starred in the British adventure The Prince and the Pauper. She made a guest appearance on The Muppet Show in 1978, where she sang I'm a Woman with Miss Piggy. The following year, she appeared as Captain Nirvana, an alien bounty hunter in an episode of Mork and Mindy, titled Mork vs. the Necrotons. In 1979, Raquel finally posed for Playboy, though she did not do a fully nude shoot. Hugh Hefner explained, Raquel Welch, one of the last of the classic sex symbols, came from the era when you could be considered the sexiest woman in the world without taking your clothes off. She declined to do complete nudity, and I yielded gracefully. The pictures prove her point. In the late 1970s, Raquel Welch began a relationship with Andre Weinfeld, a French-American producer, director, screenwriter, and journalist. The French media cruelly mocked them, labeling them Beauty and the Beast and criticizing Andre's looks. Undeterred by the negative press, the couple married on the beach in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, on July 5, 1980. However, their joy was overshadowed in early February 1983 when Welch suffered a miscarriage while vacationing in Mesquite, 3 months into her pregnancy. With a new husband by her side, Raquel felt it was time to find a new path for her career. Although it seemed like she might fade from the spotlight, she was about to face one of her greatest moments in the spotlight yet. In 1981, Raquel Welch found herself at the center of a dramatic legal battle over actors' rights. During the filming of MGM's Cannery Row, based on the John Steinbeck novel, Welch was unexpectedly dismissed from her leading role opposite Nick Nolte. The studio claims she violated her $250,000 contract by preferring to do her hair and makeup at home, rather than on set. Deborah Winger, aged 25 and therefore 15 years Welch's junior, replaced her as the film's female lead. At first, Welch was willing to accept the change if offered another role, but the studio, then managed by David Begelman, flatly refused. Welch responded by filing a $24 million breach of contract lawsuit, which became a major news story. She commented, "What they did was use me to get financing for the movie, then they dumped me for Deborah, which they'd been planning all along. The really Machiavellian part of this is that Deborah and I were represented by the same agency." MGM are more than used to this kind of thing, and like most of the major studios, they considered occasional lawsuits from disgruntled stars a minor annoyance that could be accounted for fairly easily. After all, studios almost never lost these cases. Welch's legal team, led by famous attorney Edward Mosk, argued that the case exemplified, quote, arrogant corporate executives acting without regard for human beings. MGM's lawyer countered that Welch was fired due to her temperamental behavior. Normally, this would have been enough of a cover-off for the studio and the whole thing would have been dismissed, but a fiery Welch and her legal team were not going down without a fight. The jury sided with Welch, and she celebrated by raising both fists in the air. 7 years later, an appeals court upheld the ruling and awarded her $10 million, including $8 million in punitive damages. Even though she was thrilled to win a landmark case, Welch had regrets about the whole ordeal, later saying, "I needed to clear my name, but since that time I've never starred in a major motion picture. That's not the outcome I was looking for." Ultimately, Welch earned more from Cannery Row than MGM, as the $11 million production grossed only $5 million domestically. Although Welch achieved a rare victory, Hollywood would have its revenge. The industry continued to blacklist her for the rest of her career for taking legal action against the studio. With that in mind, in the 1980s, Raquel Welch shifted her focus to television in search of more serious roles. In 1982, she starred in the NBC Western, The Legend of Walk's Far Woman, playing a 19th century Native American woman in Montana. That same year, she was considered for the role of Alexis Carrington in the ABC drama Dynasty, alongside Elizabeth Taylor and Sophia Loren, but Joan Collins was eventually chosen. Welch also ventured onto Broadway in 1982, stepping in for Lauren Bacall in Woman of the Year for 2 weeks, while Bacall was on vacation. Although the prospect of following Bacall's performance was intimidating, critics responded positively to Welch's portrayal of the character. She was even invited to return for a 6-month run the following year. In 1987, Welch took on a role in the television film Right to Die, portraying a college professor and mother with Lou Gehrig's disease, who seeks to end her life with dignity. Her performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress. By 1992, Welch's marriage to Andre Weinfeld had ended. After a period of low-profile relationships, she dated former British boxing champion Gary Stretch, who was younger than her children. In 1996, she began a relationship with Richard Palmer, owner of Mulberry Street Pizzeria. They married in 1999, but the union, which Palmer seemed to view as a way to get prime boxing tickets via his wife's connections, ended in 2003. In 1996, she joined the cast of Central Park West after CBS had already decided to cancel the show. She also guest starred on Sabrina the Teenage Witch as Aunt Vesta, and appeared in the season 8 finale of Seinfeld, where she played a comically exaggerated version of herself.
You're still here.
Well, Miss Welch, I do need to talk to you about a little problem regarding your performance.
What kind of problem?
Through her entire life, she had constantly downplayed her Latino heritage, and in fact was routinely mocked for her particularly excruciating Mexican accent in certain of her early films. but she finally accepted Hispanic roles in the PBS series American Family in 2002 and the film Tortilla Soup. Her last known relationship was with American Idol producer Nigel Lythgoe in the early to mid-2010s. Throughout her life, Welch maintained that her glamorous screen persona was starkly different to her quiet, conservative private life. She was a devoted Presbyterian and a member of Calvary Presbyterian Church in Glendale, which she described as a beautiful little church, with modest, unassuming, cheerful, and friendly people. In her final years, Raquel Welch battled Alzheimer's disease and passed away at home from cardiac arrest in Los Angeles at the age of 82 on February 15, 2023. Her daughter, Tawny Welch, continues to uphold the family name with roles in movies, TV shows, and naturally, Playboy magazine. Raquel Welch, world famous for her auburn mane and stunning figure, succeeded Marilyn Monroe as the quintessential sex symbol of the 1960s and 1970s. The New York Times in 1967 described her as a marvelous breathing monument to womankind, and Playboy named her the most desired woman of the 1970s. But she showed there were many more aspects to her life. She was modest in her private life and a fiercely independent mind who could take on something as almighty as the Hollywood studio system and win. She was mesmerizing to look at, but also had comic timing and the most valuable commodity of all in Hollywood, sheer star power. She was vilified and divisive, and her role as a sex symbol did not please her at the time, and is something that has been swept under the carpet by recent generations who are more concerned with moral standards than those of the 1960s and 1970s. However, she nonetheless defined an era of rebellion and female sexuality without ever compromising her own values. Welch helped transform Americans' feminine ideal into its current state. Her beautiful looks and eroticism made her the definitive 1960s and 1970s sex icon, rather than the blonde bombshell of the late 1950s as typified by Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield. Americans have always had sex symbols. It's a time-honored tradition, and I'm flattered to have been one, she once said. But it's hard to have a long, fruitful career once you've been stereotyped that way. That's about all for this episode. Why not check out our Hollywood Mysteries merch over on our store? We have some beautiful t-shirt designs featuring Hollywood Mysteries icons, Anna Mae Wong and Ramon Navarro, with more designs in the pipeline. And we'd also like to take a moment to thank all of our supporters here on YouTube members and over on Patreon. Why not follow the links in our description and check out the various perks of supporting these videos for the future. Please consider subscribing, sharing, and most of all, leaving us a comment to tell us what you thought about Raquel Welch and her life. Until next week, sweet dreams.